There seems to be a question that's plaguing Doctor Who about who the show's made for, as it often gets called a kids' show, and when it is, people really don't take kindly to that, and then the first party says, I don't really see what the problem is, and then everyone is all a bit confused and angry and have massive pointless shouting matches on the internet for some reason. I'm pretty sure that I've referred to Doctor Who as a kids' show in the past, but mostly in a self-deprecating way, as in, I'm a grown man who talks about a children's sci-fi show online. But aside from linguistic nitpicks over the stigma of it being labelled a kids show, which I personally think is just a nitpick really, because kids show implies kids only, whereas calling it a family show is a qualifier that means it's perfectly fine for a man in his 30s to watch it. Honestly, I don't really think this matters as much as an issue that I'm about to raise, because I do think the general sense of confusion about who the show's actually made for has been one of the things that's informed this culture of hypercriticism that's emerged online when it comes to Doctor Who in particular. I mean, the obvious point to make is that if Doctor Who were just for children, it would be broadcast on the CBBC channel and not in a prime slot on BBC One. The announcement of a new Doctor is treated as a national event. It's talked about by proper journalists all the time. Here's the internet cynic's idol Charlie Brooker talking about it on the pretentious adults channel BBC4 back in 2006. And hell, a point I've made recently is that some of us were kids when New Who started and have become adults over the period of its broadcast. I remember chatting about Doctor Who with people at uni who'd also grown up in the time of its broadcast. There's no real cut-off point indicating that you're probably too old to be watching this show anymore. I mean, there isn't a cut-off point for any show anyway, as far as I'm concerned. If you like children's programming, why stop? Who gives a shit what people think of you? But the fact this question over who's supposed to be watching Doctor Who, you know, in a boxed-in social construct kind of way, has only really come up recently is kind of odd. We now have this question over who the show's made for, when up until now there's always been this kind of awkward unspoken agreement that the show's for anyone and everyone. When it relaunched in 2005, it was kind of like Harry Potter, for kids in theory, but it is socially acceptable for adults to like it too. And does anyone remember just how weird the idea of media with no age range box was when Harry Potter first came out? That was why they published versions with more adult looking covers, to make grown-ups look less weird and out of place if they were reading them in public, because you were afraid that someone would see you with what's so obviously a kid's book and go, haven't you grown up yet? Thing is though, when Doctor Who started back in 1963, it didn't start out with a specific age range with audience exclusivity in mind, because you've got to remember that there were only 2 channels back then, and most households having a TV set was a relatively new concept. So if you were watching TV at all, you were probably going to be watching it with your whole family, so you'd better be getting your money's worth. So it was fine for adults to watch Doctor Who, but over the years kids started getting TVs in their rooms, and TVs just became a lot more commonplace. So it became much more likely that people would be watching TV alone. So yeah, again, you get the outlines of that social box starting to get thicker. People just weren't really sharing their taste in TV as much as before, so by the time Doctor Who got rebooted in 2005, when you look at the cultural climate of around that period, it seemed kind of odd that kids and grown-ups would be watching the same thing. Of course, the one thing you got to remember is that a lot's happened since 2005, and TV's an ever-evolving field that's always moving with the times. And someone high up at the Beeb should recognise this, because I and lots of people are getting really sick of hearing as a rebuttal to our prolific criticisms, "Come on, it's just a kids show." To clarify, there is no issue with people calling it a kids show in a general sense, because calling it a kids show is fairly accurate. No, the umbrage to take is with the insertion of the word just, as if children's media is somehow a lesser entity, so that means it's alright to slack off. Doctor Who has always managed to maintain a large proportion of the nation's interest until quite recently, as this excuse has become a lot more prevalent in the face of accusations of dodgy scripting. I don't want to be talking in apocalyptic terms, but there seems to be this general sense of ennui among older viewers such as myself. Occasionally we get thrown meatier stuff like Heaven Sent, but more often than not, when you start complaining about how people don't die anymore for some reason, even the body count for minor characters has become staggeringly low, the stakes don't exactly feel that high, there's a lot more kid-friendly humour, pure horror episodes are incredibly rare now, and the show's slowly started to feel like it's offering viewers a warm hug instead of making them hide behind the sofa like it did back in the day, you will more often than not get, what did you expect, it's just a kid's show, if you want something meaty go watch something for grown-ups, parroted back at you. But the thing is, even if Doctor Who is just a kid's show, which I have some serious questions about to follow, so what? Kids are people too, you know. If you give them a compelling story, they'll watch it. TV doesn't have to mollycoddle them. When I was 12, pretty much everyone I knew watched The Simpsons, and that's not made with a target age range in mind. Hell, one of my favourite movies was and still is Watership Down, and that doesn't patronise anyone for 2 seconds. Well, maybe the bits with Kia. Should we really be assuming that kids don't want something meaty? If anything, 12-year-olds want to be treated like grown-ups. Just look at the phenomenon that South Park was among kids when it first started. While It's a Kid Show is a descriptor, I do feel that It's Just a Kid Show is an excuse, and a really poor one at that, because why would you brush off criticism with that when Doctor Who is in fact one of the biggest shows the BBC puts out? It's usually on Netflix, the advertising is plastered all over the internet, and just look at the mammoth amount of online discussion it generates among people of all ages stoked by the age of social media. So, if someone high up is encouraging the show to move in a more child-friendly direction, you know, the younger skewed humour, lack of death, etc., why? Where is this idea coming from? Why would anyone think that Doctor Who is just a kid's show? What we've got here is a show that's supposed to be the BBC's worldwide pitch to the market of people who binge-watch Netflix, that's apparently meant for 12-year-olds and only some sad weirdos above that. Being scary and confrontational is almost out of the question, but the show's also looking to start moving in darker directions. They started broadcasting it in a later time slot, and very occasionally it chucks out stuff like Heaven Sent, and it does stuff like Don't Cremate Me, in between the very warm and fuzzy kid-friendly ones. Okay, serious question. Does anyone else think that someone high up got a bit confused a while back? While yes, as I've been arguing, Doctor Who's target audience should be broad by nature, it attracts an incredibly diverse audience, but it just currently appears to be running a sort of patchwork of different bits of different target audience typesets that just don't really gel together that well. The show doesn't seem to know what it wants to do. It's in serious danger of losing its own identity in trying to be all things to all people all at once. People who use the It's Just a Kid show as a reason why Doctor Who shouldn't be growing and maturing and challenging its audience, I really think need to take a look at the bigger picture. Yes, Doctor Who is in a general sense a kid's show, but kids may appreciate something that takes account of the fact that older people are watching it as well. In fact, I think they would appreciate that too, because kids aren't stupid, they want to be challenged, they should be challenged. And again, as I keep saying, I was 14 when New Who started. I'm 25 now and a loyal fanboy. Does the show just not want people like me anymore? Is that the reason that we only get something meaty once every couple of years or so? And my other point is to do with how much things have changed since 2005, and that point is the internet. While over the years people's taste in TV became less of a shared experience, as TV stopped being that one central device in your home, the internet is encouraging the return of this sense of community among TV viewers and, hell, consumers of all types of media. There are hundreds of people who talk about Doctor Who in videos, thousands more in the comments, on a ton of forums, people from all walks of life coming together to talk about a TV show they watch. And they don't appear to be exclusively composed of children. TV is becoming more of a shared experience again. The internet is making this idea of a TV show that's just for young people an outmoded concept. When I say things like, I think Doctor Who should be trying to broach maturity by its 11th year in production, I do not mean fill it with stuff that means kids can't watch it. Maturity does not equal sex, violence and swearing. You got other shows for that. What I'm saying is, when we say that Doctor Who is a kid's show on principle, that doesn't mean you should use it as an excuse to underestimate your audience. Why should you be assuming that they can't handle something with deep themes, with emotional confrontation, with, yes, horror? Something that doesn't feel safe. And those of us who've grown up with the show would stay with it too, because if you've got a story on your hands that anyone of any age finds compelling, that is always going to be an experience that sticks with your viewer more than something that's too afraid to challenge them and potentially show them something that they'll find difficult to handle.